והמצווה השתיים ותשעים. היא שציווה הנוזיר לגדל השיער. So grow the gadil is to grow the hair. The nazir is supposed to grow the hair. V'omer Yisrael gadil pera sarosha. Okay. Now here, let's start slowly. And let's take nothing for granted. Okay. First of all, as everyone knows, maybe science has gone ahead a little bit, but in growing hair, it either comes naturally or it doesn't. Okay, so there's no miser. There's no miser. It happens by itself, and even more so, it's not under man's volition. Man can't decide to grow his hair or not to grow his hair. Either, the hair grows or it doesn't grow, If you look, this becomes very murky now. Because if you look at the second parak, Shmona Prokim, the Ram says that an act which is not under man's control could not be a mitzvah. So the question which you have to ask yourself is why or how can you talk about a growing your hair as a mitzvah? The Rambam says like this in Perik Beis: Da ki ameri v'mishma'as hatorim, the Torah as an adjective, the rebellion against God or the listening to God. He says which chelke nefesh it applies to. V'heima chelke amalgish v'chelek mis'or levado. But for example, ub'shnei eila chalokim, which are man's under man's control, yiyu haveirus hamitzvos. Aval hachelek hazon v'chelek hamadameh, the digestive system and the imagination, ein mishmas b'hem v'lo meri. There's no control. They're involuntary. The imagination either works or doesn't, and the digestive tract is an involuntary action. It's not under man's control. Yiflu beis hashena. They happen during sleep. Not under the control. Mashein came b'shakach as a nefesh. I'm skipping. Ulefikoch omalti l'mayla sheb'shnei achalokim oheim yimotzu averis hamitzvah. Means the first two, which are under man's volition. So, how can you have a mitzvah to grow your hair when the growing of the hair you can't control it, okay? And so we'll just now the next tweak, or whatever you want to call it, will take away other options you want to answer this, okay? You remember in Rambam that we assume the Rambam, like the Bahag, that the Rambam requires, since in Shiur Shmini, Sivui is a command, and a command means to do something. Command means to do something and not to do something. Command means to do something. So you can't imagine an Isa Aseh, it has to be a Kum Aseh to do something. And that's what the command says. So the growing of your hair, which has to be under your shlita, can you only imagine in the case, not in the case of an Isa Aseh to cut your hair, which is under your volition. You can cut your hair, but you're talking about growing your hair. The mitzvah is to grow the hair. So the Kum Aseh, and under your volition, I just don't understand how you can say there's a Mitzvah Aseh of Legad, of Tziva Hanoze Legadil Hasar in the Rambam's family reference. True, we'll see later in this mitzvah, there is the removal of the hair, but that's an Isa Aseh. And if that's all you have, that's not enough to make a mitzvah. So then, this is only the beginning, okay? So a priori, this mitzvah violates everything we understand what a mitzvah has to be. It's not a deal. If you say not to cut my hair, I understand. But if you say to grow the hair, so, you can't do it. Okay. So the question is, how it can be a mitzvah? So now, you can bring in, that the Rambam brings in, he brings in the Chachmei HaMesorah, and he quotes the Mechilta, Veloshim Mechilta, okay, which really is a Sefer Zuta. And the Rambam, if you recall, we have to keep count, in many places has called a Sifri or a Mechilta Sefer Zuta. And if you look back at just from what we've done already, besides mitzvah over here, Tzadi Beis, you look at your Dalet, Chof Beis, Lamed Aleph, and Ayin Gimel. In those mitzvahs, he calls the Sifri Zuta the Mechilta Sifri. Okay, good. We discussed it then, I don't have to discuss it again. Maybe the Sifrei Tanoim, Amoraim, Mechilta, whatever. Okay, say that. So maybe one will come and tell me, since it says in the Mechilta, the Matiki Ashmula, Kodesh Yeh, Gadol B'Kedusha, we'll see about this Mitzvah Shem later. The din is at the Gidol should be B'Kedusha. We'll see what that means. Gadol B'Kedusha. Then it says, Gadol Pera Mitzvas Aseh. So someone will come to say, it says Gadol Pera Mitzvas Aseh. So if Gadol Pera is a Mitzvas Aseh, and the Matiki Ashmua said it, so we have no problem. The Matiki Ashmua said it's a mitzvah, so it's a mitzvah. But here, it's not so simple at all. Because we'll see, and we saw, for example, in at the end of Shiur Shlishi, and we'll see later in Mitzvah Tzadi Gimel, the same type of thing, where the Matiki Ashmua said that Bosa Taiva is a mitzvah. The Ram quotes it. The Ram quotes it in at the end of Shiur Shlishi. So you understand that it's not a mitzvah minyan mitzvahs, because it's a mitzvah shah. So since it doesn't fulfill the basic definition of what a mitzvah is, so the Matiki Ashmua, that's the conclusion you draw. So now we're back to over here. If the basic definition of a mitzvah is, number one, something which is under your volition, which this is not, and number two, something which you do, kum v'aseh, which is also which you're not. So if the Rambam had said that mitzvahs are Mitzvas Aseh also and Minyan mitzvahs, so I would say Matov Manoim. But if you take the position that mitzvahs are commands and a kumbaseh, and you accept the position in Shmona Prakim that mitzvahs are something which I can control. I can either do or not do. So it's very confusing to say that there should be a mitzvah called Gadol Pera. Okay? I think it's a reasonable question. Reasonable question. Okay, now. And if you tell me the Chazal use the term of Mitzvas Aseh by Shiur Aseh, then the term itself is not a proof of anything. So you have to take a position. And it's very difficult to imagine how one is going to say, what exactly is the mitzvah? The mitzvah is to do something. And it can't be, because it's not under my control. Now, so it means that, again, what we have over here, let's go to the next step. This is an amazing problem, you know. I don't understand it. But okay, say that. Next point is to look how the other Monia mitzvahs deal with this, okay? So the Bahag, who only counts Kumbaseh Mitzvaseh, as you would expect, he doesn't count a Kumbaseh of Gadol Pera, which, according to the Rambam's rules, he's done the right thing, and you can question the Rambam. He only has the Azorah of in Ashor Shaloiken Aleim Kuf Samach Aleph Ta'alo Yavla Roisha, which is very understandable. But he doesn't, and then he has parashas which are almost like it's almost a chameleon. It doesn't necessarily have to fit other categories, and we can discuss this barichos and Bet Hashem maybe next week or the week after. We'll see, but Parshas, he has Parshas Nazir, which is okay. He didn't put in the Kumbaseh. He can put Parshas Nazir, and whatever it is, that's what it is. It's not a command. So you don't need Kumbaseh. And the only question is, you can ask yourself whether Parshas require Mashmos and Mary. So, you don't know what the Bahag's opinion about this is anyway. Okay? Okay. Now, what is Afsadi going to do here? I just want to show you the Rambam's problem is basically, again, he's basically defined for himself a situation where I can imagine that a mitzvah of Gadol Pera is impossible. Okay, now, Afsadi going in Perek Yud Aleph, Amud 89, he has Azhora Shelo Yigaleh Chanozir. V'im Nodar al Atzmo Lios Nozir, Hu Chayiv Bekama Mitzvahs, V'lo Yigaleach Es Sar Roishoy, Ki Oimroi Kol Yemei Neder Nizroi Ta'ar. Now, here, he doesn't mention Gadol Pera. Okay? So, what happened to it? Okay? We don't know that he has, that he requires kumvaseh, which we'll discuss about riches also next week and the week after. We don't know that at all. So the question is, he a priori, he has no problem of Gadol Pera, unless you tell me that he's working with Mashmos and Mary, which we don't know that's true at all. The easiest way to do this is, here is another important point in Rav Sadi Gaon, which, you see, I think he basically denies the whole idea of command in mitzvahs. And in command, the Rambam discovered, and the Gemara Makis, that there are two types of mitzvahs. There are Mitzvas Aseh and a Mitzvas Lois Aseh, with two types of commands. Either command in language to do, or command in language not to do. Correct? However, if you deny the necessity of a command and you're ready to claim that mitzvahs are basically religious legislation without any commands, so then a priori there is no difference between a mitzvah aseh and a mitzvah lois aseh. It's the same legislation. Especially if there's no difference between the two, the aseh and the los aseh are mirror images of each other, so in a priori it should be one mitzvah. Okay? And the fact is, lo and behold, Rav Sadi Gaon does that. He has the last section of his Sefer HaMitzvos. He has a section called Chasimus HaSefer. On page 246. And the general principle is that the general principle is a direct, a clear disagreement to Shiur Shishi. The Rambam Shiur Shlishi has developed the principle that an aseh and a lois aseh, even it's on the same thing, is two mitzvahs. Concept Chadi Goynis is the opposite. If an aseh and a lois aseh are exactly the same, it's really one mitzvah minyan mitzvahs. And he says, therefore, that achilas behemet tmeya and the mitzvah aseh lecho behemet tehera are one mitzvah minyan. Because it's impossible to violate, it's one. In other words, you by violating the aseh, you violate the lav. And by violating the lav, you violate the aseh. So it's really the mirror image of each other. So the fact that one's formulated in the positive fashion and the other negative fashion is not a reason to make it two mitzvahs. So maybe then that cutting your hair and stopping it from growing by some sam is really the same. And therefore, Rav Sadi Gaon doesn't count it as two. He just counts giluach. This, however, the Rambam will see later in this mitzvah, says that through removal of hair through a sam only violates the aseh, not the lav. So then you would have a difference between the two, and it's not the mirror image. But the question is, and he assumes that the lav is only on giluach kain tar, sini kain tar. So, and hasoras asar is not kain tar. But maybe Rav Sadi Gaon disagrees, And this is the approach that Mishnah Melech really has, because he asks a kasha in the Rambam, and he says, so chiyun, and he assumes that there's no difference. And even hashora through Sam should violate the law. That's one way of doing it. Or you can say, maybe Avsadigun agrees. But maybe this increment, this difference, that Sam violates the Aseh and not Lois Aseh, is only according to the Mekablim. It's a chiddush of the Kabbalah. But according to Pshutei Shel Mikra, taking off your hair, giluach, and growing your hair is all the same, and then it would all be one mitzvah. But whatever it is, Rav Saadia Gaon does not have a separate mitzvah gadol pera, and the Bahag doesn't have it. The Rambam does, and in doing so, that is an amazing thing. He seems to violate the basic principle of what a mitzvah is, of mashmos and meri, and he also violates the idea of kum vaseh. That is what I have to say so far on this. Okay, let's continue. V'shom ne'emar, or uminayin, b'lois aseh tamalo metar lo yavla roishes, and aseh of gadol pera, mitzvah aseh, and the mitzvah aseh of tar lo yavla roishes. V'shom ne'emar, in this sifrizuta or mechilta, whatever you want to call it, ma nishirason bi'aseh, or sharasi basei, of different gesos, but it's basically that the hair coming off. Hachayfev badomo vanoisin samonim is some type of something you smear on your head that takes the hair off. Kloima shanozis shesom al roishay refuah. I'm not sure exactly why it's called the refuah, but the refuah lahashi hasar. Lo yiye oz over al mitzvos aseh ki hu lo yehave ke'ein tam. And this is the Ram Shita that you need ke'ein tam for the lav. And that's the answer. It's ke'ein tam, but you don't say that havor with Sam is not a Maisa, and therefore he's not over. That's not the pshat. The Ram says gain tam, and the Ram in fact says that you could be violate the lav kareach and be chayiv malchus if you kareach with Sam. The Ram in Hilchos Avodah Zorah perek Yud Beis halacha tezvav a kareach arba chamesh kochos al meis echod loike k'minyan ha-kochos v'chulei echod kareach biyodoi Oy besam. O hitpil etz boys of besam. V'nichom b'chamesh makoy chamesh makoymos. B'loish basachas is the chalaike. Okay, so the Rambam says the problem is kein tau. We don't know if everyone agrees with that. The Lechem Mishnah asked the Rambam. It's a very difficult Lechem Mishnah because you don't necessarily have to look at the Gemara like that at all. The Lechem Midrams in Perek Hey Halacha Yud Beis in Hilchos Naziris Hevi Al Rosh Sam Shemeishir Es Asar V'Hishi Es Asar Eino Loike Ela Bitul Mitzvas Aseh Shenema Gadol Per Asar Rosh. Omnom, the Lechem Mishnah says that he doesn't understand the Rambam. The Chayyim should violate the law. This kasha, is not. I don't know. I'm not, it's not very impressive. What can I say? Because the Gemara knows here, I remember when Aleph, Libui, shall call a Meshirin, Hurak Lazora, Ukein Town. And that's what the Rambam says. And that's the Rambam passing Hilchos Naziris in Perek Hey, Halacha Yud Aleph. Noz Gilach Sa'achas Loike, Bein Betal, Bein Bezug, Hu Shekotze Me'iko, Kein Town. And L'cheira, that's a sifrizuta. is like that because the Sefer Zuta only quotes the Aseh when it talks about Badomo or Besam. Okay, so the Ram is okay. But let's do this again. Okay? Because if you look over here, the Ram says, Ki hu lo heve ke'ein ta'al, omnom hu over al mitzvahs aseh. Right? So it means there's an Isa Aseh of Havora with some. That's what he clearly says. Okay. And it means there is an Isa Aseh in not only is the Mitzvas Aseh of Gadol Pera, there's an Isa Aseh. And the Pirush HaMishnah also seems to go in that fashion. The Pirush HaMishnah in Nozir Perek Vav Mishnah Gimel, V'yomer Yisrael Gadol Pera Sar Roisha Lefikach also Lasir Be'eza Oifen Midal Kasos Asar. So that's what he's saying. It's an Isa Aseh Lefikach also. And the Rambam Hilchos Naziris Perek Zayin Halacha Tezvav V'haloi Nozir Shegilach R'mei Nizrei Ova Al Lo Isa Aseh V'aseh. So there certainly is an Isa Aseh here in removing your hair. Shenema Kodesh Yeh Gadol Pera, even in Mishnah Torah. And that's what Chaim Shtikol Torah in Chedush HaGrach, in Yevamos, and Daf Hey, Amid Aleph, Asher Nire, the Shnei Dinim Shoinim, V'chaluyos Nifrodes, Nemu B'aseh Shel Kodesh Yeh Gadol Pera, Sa'aloishay, Aleph Din Isa Aseh, the Nozer Shegilach Oiva Al Aseh Shel Kodesh Yeh, Isa Aseh Kishar Yisur Aseh B'chol HaTorah Kula, B'chol HaTorah K'muvur B'Sugya Noz L'Fnal Tesam Beis Din Gilach Lei B'Tah Koyim Alei B'Aseh V'Lo Yisaseh U'Pirusha Shel Aseh U'Isa Aseh V'Chalo Shemais Aveira K'moy Alav. The oddity over here, it is true. The Rambam over here says that Havora with some is an Isa Aseh. That's what he says. You don't violate the law because you need Kain Tal, but it's Omnom over our Mitzvas Aseh. However, Piskilov Zechreinu Levocha is Medayik in the Rambam and Mishnah Torah, not like that. The Rambam in Perek Hey, if it was Naziris, Halacha Yud Beis, Hevir al Roshei Sam Shemeshir es Hasar V'hishir es Hasar Eino Loike Elo Bittel Mitzvahs Aseh Shnei Gadol Pera Sar Roshei. He's Mevatel a Mitzvah Aseh. He doesn't say that you violated Isa Aseh. The Isa Aseh he said by Giluach and with the Maisa Giluach. And you have an Aseh Lois Aseh. But he doesn't have. So Biskulov points out the Rambam. But the Chera, if what Biskulov's diuk is correct, he doesn't point out the stira, both in Pirush HaMishnah and and in the and in Minyan HaMitzvah over here, it's very clear it's an Isa Aseh. Now things become even more interesting now. Okay, good. But say that's what we have. Correct? Now he goes further. V'hu omroi gadel pera v'zeh lo gidel. Ova basei v'hu omar gadel pera v'zeh lo gidel. It's a very odd way. Zelo Gidel, the whole Loshem Zelo Gidel, and Lo Gidel this is in the Judeo-Arabic Lo Gidel, don't make no sense, you'll excuse me. Because if he says Vizer Kilu, he took off the hair and he violated Isa. I understand. V'zelo Gidol means he wasn't Mekayim the Aseh. So you don't see anything more than a Bittul Aseh. So this is very difficult. He says like this, says, you see, what we saw before, he hasn't seen anything new. He's explaining what we saw before. You see, it says in the Lashon before, man nishirosam bi'aseh. Okay? So now he's explaining man nishirosam b'aseh. And he says, b'aseh means ovar al mitzvahs aseh. And that aseh omagadol pera. V'zeh lo gidol v'lava bo mocha aseh asehu. Kmo shehu asherish etzleinu ukfar izboye dine mitzvah b'mekoyim meseches nezirus. So this is what we have. Now, here it's very odd. If you recall in general, we said that since the Rambam doesn't count Isui Aseh, so how can he quote Lava Bo Mechlal Aseh in general as a raya that it's a mitzvah minyan mitzvahs? That we had this problem, correct? So we said that B'derech Klal, the Rambam is not the one who's responsible for this loshon. What do I mean? That if the Matiki Ashmua say Lava Bo Mechlal Aseh Aseh, it's an edus in Matiki Ashmua because they say in this case it's a Lava Bo Mechlal Aseh. It means you're supposed to do something and you do the opposite. And this is an aseh. So it's an edus in the Matiki Ashmua by saying Lava Bo Mechlal Aseh Aseh, that it's an aseh. Okay? So when that's the case, when you see a lot of people take Lava Bo Mechlal Aseh Aseh, it's only this aseh. The Rambam is Lava Bo Mechlal Aseh, it's an edus Matiki Ashmua, it's an aseh. Okay. However, when there's a new rule over here, okay? And I'll tell you what it is. It goes like this. The Rambam learned, for example, let's do Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol Mitzvah Aseh Lamed Ches. The Ram says, Ubiaru zeh kishehoye Kohen Gadol bo al bilti psula shehi asura loy ba'aseh shasherish etzleinu lava bo mechlal aseh aseh. So what the Rambam has done, and it doesn't say anyway, he doesn't quote the Yerushalmi, maybe he didn't interpret well. There's a Yerushalmi that seems to say, I think, by Basul Kohen Gadol, Bula Kohen Gadol, Lava B'Chal, something like Lava B'Chal, but the Bible is not there, and the Rambam doesn't quote it. He just says that the Gemara says it's Ba'aseh. So he learns Ba'aseh means that it's Ba'aseh it's a lav habol. It's as if when they say ba'aseh, it's as if they said it's a lav habol muchal aseh. And that's what he says in Lamed Ches. He quotes ba'aseh, and he says, "Shashoyis Islenu lav habol muchal aseh." Here also, the Matiki Ashmua said, V'shom Nema, that's the second proof. Ma nishirosam ba'aseh. And ba'aseh means that it's an isa aseh, which is a lav abo mechlal aseh. So it's another raya that it's a mitzvah minyan mitzvahs. And that's what he's trying to do. The same way he did it in Lamed Ches. By Nazir. I mean, excuse me, by Bula Kohen Gadol. Okay, now, next. I don't, however, so what he probably means then, Vu Amroi Gadol Pera, Ba'aseh means that, first of all, he wasn't Mekayim the Aseh, and there's an Isa attached to it. So that's his Amroi Gadol Pera V'zelo Gidel. And the next step, it's not only, it's a Bittel Aseh, but it's a Lava B'mocha Aseh, and it's Aseh V'zelo Gidel, Lava B'mocha Aseh. Okay? I'm just odd what you need two steps. Because you say V'zelo Gidel, that's enough. Because he wasn't Mekayim the Aseh. If you say that it's only Gadol Pera and there's an Isa Aseh and Lava B'mocha Aseh, then I understand what he's doing. But if he says Lava Gadol Pera V'zelo Gidel, like Bisklov Mishnatera, Bittel Aseh, you don't need another step. So this is odd. Because a Manashach, if you need it, you should be Lashon Isa. And if it's a Lashon Zelo Gidel, you don't need anything more. Okay, next. VaMitzvah Sholish V'tishim. He should siva hanozir legaleich es roishoy. V'havoas korbonoisov, which is in the original Jewry Arabic. Havoas korbonoisov, and the next part is not b'melois yemei hanazirus. Naziris. So what the Ram has done is made a mitzvah giluach, but he's merged it by Nazir. They're two things together, which merge together as one mitzvah. It's the giluach Nazir, galech es reishoy, v'avos korban oisav. So a priori, even before we start, this is very reminiscent of Shorish Yud Beis. Because we remember there was the Maisa Oila, the Shchita, the Zrike, the Haktorah, and whether it's in Oila, the Haktorah from Olevom Mizbeach, and the hefshet, and the giving the altar, whatever he goes through, there's a whole seder of a ma'aser over here. Here also, there are two parts. Galeach roishay v'avos korban oisav. This l'cheira is Shorish Yud Beis. And that's where he develops in Shorish Yud Beis, that this is one mitzvah. Now, here, he says, V'loshen Sifro, Shloishe Megalchin, V'tigel Chosem Mitzvah, Anozev HaMitzvah V'Levim. Okay? Now, before I get started, okay, this is absolutely amazing. There's a Mishnah in the Goyim in Perek Yud Dalet, Mishnah Dalet, which you open it up, says the exact same thing. That Shloisha Megalchim, Tiglas a mitzvah, Hanoza Mitzvah Levim. And the Ram quotes this from a Sefer, which is in my Pasha Mitzvah, Pasha Beis, in the beginning, Perek Beis, Halacha Vav. So here, and what does it say? Shloisha Megalchim v'tiglas a mitzvah. So we said, but this is even more amazing. We said that the Ram quotes, in general, the Safrus, the Medrash Halacha, and not the Talmud Bavli, even though the Talmud Bavli is more authoritative in terms of Psak Halacha, but the Ram learned that a Stam Medrash Halacha is the Lashon of the Matiki Ashmor is a Pirush Makubal. And in Minyan HaMitzvos, the Pirush Makubal is a very, very important thing. And that's what he wants to prove. If the Matiki Hashmor say it's a mitzvah, it has much more weight. And even the Mishnah, which is the Tanoim and everything, but since they're coming in the Mishnah to say halacha, they're not coming necessarily to tell you the Messiah. It's a better raya from the Sefer than from the Mishnah. Okay? It's an amazing thing. Now, but however, it is true that the Ram says in Mitzvah Yud Gimel that he proves that Tefillin Shalosh and Tefillin Shiyat for Mo Menachos, as the Mo calls it, Shtei Mitzvahs. But you can prove from the Gemara, the Talmud Bavli, their Lashon. But what's a better proof? The Sefer. And therefore he quotes the Sefer, not the Mishnah. Next. Here we're stuck with the same problem again. But here we can get out of the woods, I hope. Shloishe Megalchin v'tigal chasam mitzvah. Hanozav ha'mitzvah halavim. And the Ram is going to prove from the Lashon mitzvah, as we go see later, v'giluach mitzvah v'nazir, and he's going to prove that they're a mitzvah from these words in the Sefer. Okay. However, he starts out and he points, it's true that Giluach Nazir, the Tiglachas, Nazir and Metzera is a mitzvah, but in the Sefer is also mentioned Levim. And Levim is not a mitzvah. Levim is not a deres. Onam Giluach HaLevim Hoye b'midbo ve'en nogeis l'deres. V'giluach mitzera v'nozir is nogeis l'deres. Therefore, Giluach Nozir and mitzera are mitzvahs, and Giluach Levim is not a mitzvah. Okay. See here, exactly what he does at the end of Shurish Gimel in Bosataiva, he quotes a mitzvah to the Shah, and he calls it a mitzvah. But, you ask yourself the question, isn't the word mitzvah a very technical term from the Matiki Ashmur to say that it's a mitzvah in the minyan? So, l'cheira, the answer is yes. So how can you use the mitzvah by the word Levim? And if you use the mitzvah by the word Levim, by Tiglachas Levim, so how is it a proof that Tiglachas Nazir Mitzvah is a mitzvah? So I think that the answer is that basically Tiglachas Levim is a mitzvah. It was a tzivui incorporated Torah Shebiksav. And it's a mitzvah like any other mitzvah in the Torah. And as you recall, I've mentioned my Rebbe, discussion with father, one Shavuos, what would be if you violate a mitzvah Moshe Rabbeinu or Hashah, is it over Divrei Novi, or is it a violation of a mitzvah? So I think clearly I would say from here that it is a mitzvah. It is a mitzvah. But there's one problem over here. There's one simple problem. There's one simple problem. And the problem is that we know that mitzvahs, Taryag mitzvahs, Nemel Moshe B'Sinai. And the Ram says in Shiur Sheni that the word Sinai means Iker Sinai, which is mitzvah deres. And he also quotes in Torah Tzivul on Moshe, Morash Akilas Yaakov, that mitzvah in minyan requires a mitzvah deres. So it is true that the Matiki Ashmur can say mitzvah, even if it's not in minyan, but because it basically is a mitzvah. But it's not in the minyan for the reason that we don't count mitzvahs l'shor. So here in Nazir and Mitzera, who fulfills all the definitions of mitzvah, the fact they call it a mitzvah is okay. Okay? The problem still maintained, what I mentioned before, is what do you do with Gadol Pera, which a priori is missing in the basic definition of mitzvah, because there's no mashmos and meri in Gadol Pera. Now, so what comes out is Giluach Nazir and Giluach Mitzera should be two separate mitzvahs, the minyan mitzvahs. Now, then he continues, and here is very, very interesting. Mavuahu Kilenoze Shnei Gilucha. See, here's the problem. There are two different Gilucha by Noze. So how do you count in minyan mitzvahs? Tiglachas Tuma, V'hu Amro Yis'ale, V'chiyomus, Meis Ola B'fesa Pisayim, V'tiglachas Ta'ara, V'hu Amro B'yoim Melois Yimei Nizroi. There are two types of Tiglachas. There's the Tiglachas Tuma and the Tiglachas Ta'ara. Okay? Now, why isn't it two mitzvahs and minyan mitzvahs? Okay. So he says, "Ve'ein roi sheyimnu shtei tiglachas o elu b'shtei mitzvahs." Okay. So now let's see what his reason is. Okay. Lefi shetiglachas tumo hu midin. And you look over here at the Arabic, the midin is fikeh, which is the word that we had in the seventh shurish, which we'll deal with it soon. Okay? Okay? So here's an important word. Hu midin mitzvahs naziris. What's mitzvah naziris? Which mitzvahs are we talking about? The Rambam has said this in an amazingly confusing way. Lefi shehu fikeh mitzvahs naziris. Okay, now he's going to explain it. He understands that it needs explanation. He mitzvahs aseh shelo hu sheyarbe pera b'kedusha. The mitzvah of, now which mitzvah is he talking about? Gadol pera. The mitzvah Gadol Pera is to begadol b'kedusha. So a person who is nitba b'meis, the gidul that he's doing now is not b'kedusha. So what does he do? He does a giluach to enable him to have a gadol b'kedusha. Here, there's a mice, it's very nice, but okay. Kamo shebi'alnu. And he's referring to Kamo shebi'alnu in gadol pera, gadol b'kedusha, inside the base. V'don oisei hakosu b'zeh, v'yomer shim nitma b'meis, v'mei nezir shigal v'ovi korbim, v'yoz yosi v'gadol pera b'kedusha kebatchila, v'kebatchilas min yemei nezir shechayev nafshay. So I ask a simple question. This Giluach Tuma, why is it minyan HaMitzvos? So I think what he said is this is a fikeh of the mitzvah of Gadol Pera. There are two ways. Fikeh means the whole Yisod of Shorish Shvi is that I have various modus operandi to Mekayim a mitzvah. So in Nazirus, there are two ways to Mekayim the mitzvah Gadol Pera. There's one way, if he's not nitma, just to sit back and let the hair grow. And then there's another way where he's nitma. Giluach. First of all, tahara from the tumas meis, tahara from tumas meis, giluach. And you understand yourself that this gadol sera now, gadol seya is gadol b'kedusha. And the fikah, what he's saying is that this second tiglachas, the tiglachas tuma, should really go under the mitzvah before, mitzvah tzadi beis. Okay. Now here, we are presented with a problem, because l'cheira, I would assume that here in Sefer HaMitzvos, it's very clear that Tiglachas Tuma is a fikah of the mitzvahs Nazirus, which I think he means the mitzvah Gadol Pera, Gadol B'Kedusha. However, in the Minyan HaKotze, in the Protei HaMitzvos, he puts them together, and I'll show you what he means. And he seems to have a different approach than what he has over here. Because in Minyan HaKotze, in Mitzvah Tzadi Gimel, he says like this: Legaleach hanozeh sa'aroi al korbanosov b'mlois yemei nizroi oi b'seich yemei nizroi im nitma shenema v'chi yitma v'chi yomus meis olav. So a priori, it's two ways to Mekayim the mitzvah Giluach. There's Giluach Tuma and Giluach Tara and Giluach Tuma. And the Protei mitzvah begin Hilchos Nazirus. She'igalach al-korbanos k'sheyashlim Nazirus or k'sheyitmeh. It's a mitzvah Giluach korbanos. So I asked myself, the Giluach Tuma doesn't do anything. He's back to where he started from. If you say that there's Giluach Tara, and then there's Giluach Tuma with Giluach Tara, no, I understand. Maybe you might say it, okay? And maybe he means it. But it's Ikar Chosav and Sefer. And if I had to choose, I would have chosen the Sefer Mitzvahs. And it's mamish, it's part of the Seder. You could have said that the Giluach Tuma is really nothing. It's only in Shorish Asiri. It's a hakidomo. It's a prelude to the mitzvah of Gadol Pera. So maybe it's not part of it. So says the Rambam, no, it's part of it, okay? But what he does in the Minyan HaKotze and the Protei mitzvahs, to make it part, you have a choice. This tiglachos, it's not really this or that. it's really tiglachas taira or tiglachas tuma and taira. And what, it's two ways to kind of miss tiglachas? This tiglachas somehow merges with the other tiglachas? It's an amazing thing. It's a very different approach. Then the Ram continues, and he says, which is also very odd, he says like this. He says, Kimo, we said, Madonna is a kosuv, but Bezer, Vyomash, Kim Nitma, Meis, Bimei Naziris, Yigaleach, Vyovi Korban, it means he's nitto in between. Vyoz Yoshu, Vyagado, Pera Bekdusha, Kibetchila. Kibetchilas Minyan Anazir, Ve'anazir, Shechayev Nafshi, Chiyev Nafshi, it's very clear. Kmo Shiesh, Lemitzera, Gam Kein Shtei Tiglachas, Ve'hein Mitzvah Achas. But the Kmo is very different then, because if you learn the way I learn, the first Tiglachas is, it's not two mitzvah minyan because it's really part of something else. And here he's saying in Tiglachas Mitzera is the Tiglachas Mitzera at the end, he does two Tiglachas, one with the Tziporim and one after the Sheva Yomim, at the end of the Sheva Yomim. So he says they become one mitzvah, okay? If he had quoted what he said in the Shloshim, in Shirshit Aleph, with Tiglachas Mitzera is part of Tziporim. So the first Tiglachas is part of Tziporim. And it's like the first Tiglachas of Nazir, of the Tiglachas Tuma, is part of the mitzvah Gadol Pera. And the second Tiglachas is the mitzvah. That I understand. But here, he's putting together Shtei Tiglachas, Ve'in Mitzvah Achas. So what's the parallel structure? If the parallel structure means that the two Tiglachas and Nazir refer to one mitzvah, he's saying the same thing, which he says in the Mir HaKotzer and in Mishnah Torah. That's true. But the words over here seem to clearly go the other way, that it's part of Gadol Pera, Gadol B'Kedusha. Okay. Now, I just want to tell you, interesting, in Rav Sadi Goin, he also does a similar thing in the Rambam, but dissimilar. He has one mitzvah which we clearly have in the Kittei Geniza, and another mitzvah which parts of it seem to point to that, and it's certainly in the Piyut and the Asharos. He has a mitzvah of Havos Korbanos of Taira, and a mitzvah Havos Korbanos of Tuma. And he doesn't mention the Tiglachas at all. The Matiki Ashmua said the Tiglachas mitzvah. So again, outside of the Shitasa, the minyan of mitzvahs is Pshuta Shel Mikra. And the Pshuta Shel Mikra, he assumes maybe that the Tiglachas is only a machshir, and he wouldn't quote it as a You have to ask yourself, why? Is it because of the machshir and how he deals with machshir in general, which itself is an issue? Or it's part of a ma'aser, and it quotes the end of the ma'aser, but he does not quote the Tiglachas at all in his minyan of mitzvahs. Hine avaye b'ma she'achazeh hasiba menoise tiglachas nozir v'korbanos mitzvah achas v'tiglachas mitzera v'korbanos shtei mitzvahs. That what Mitzvah Hashem will deal with in Kuf Yud Aleph. Kfayis boil mishpatei mitzvah zu gam kein kloim tiglachas nozir v'mekoyim v'sechas nozir nezirus. Okay, say that. So we'll end over here.